Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. Thank you for joining today's episode. We're on a mission to share e-commerce logistics insights, trends, successes, and challenges from the leaders and innovators in our space.
The only impression that you make that drives brand loyalty is the opening of that box and how it's presented, and then obviously the performance or the use of that product itself. And so I think it's still going to be a really tough decision for brands to want to compromise on packaging or how the product's being delivered and presented to that end customer. And they'd rather say, I sent you a tracking number. It's okay if it comes tomorrow, right?
Welcome, Ecom Logistics Nation. This episode, Nanad and I welcome Laura Ritchey, CEO of Radial. As CEO of Radial North America, a bpost company, Laura builds on her extensive experience and leadership, continuing her commitment to innovating and optimizing e-commerce solutions. Prior to this role, she served as Radial's Chief Operating Officer from 2021 to 2023, where she directed Omni-Channel, fulfillment, transportation, and customer care solutions. She has more than 25 years of experience leading retail, manufacturing, distribution, and business operations, with a successful track record of steering transformational initiatives, developing high-performing teams, and improving financial results. Her impressive experience includes EVP Operations at L Brands for Victoria's Secret, Chief Operating Officer at FullBeauty Brands, and Chief Operating Officer at Client-centric Brands. She holds a BA, MBA, and JD from the Ohio State University and currently serves on the Board of Goodwill Manasota. Laura, we are truly excited for this conversation. Thank you for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and speak with you both. I'm sure lots of fun topics.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on the pod today, Laura. Really looking forward to the conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And Laura, with that, I absolutely love your background, and I'm excited you made the shift from brand retailer life to 3PL life. And, after a storied career in retail, curious about your career transition journey to the 3PL space. And if you could share what that journey was like and how you're feeling about that decision now that it's been a few years.
Yes, I think starting my career at L Brands with Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works clearly helped me develop a strong affinity for brands, right? So as I think about brands, how brands make customers loyal, how we grow, how we think about that really developed my affinity to be part of branded companies. When you think about the supply chain in a brand, it's really about the same thing though, right? You're trying to deliver that customer experience, whether you're getting the product to the store or you're getting the product to the warehouse to ultimately get it to wherever the customer directed it to be sent. So the 3PL switch wasn't as difficult as you might think, because really what you're doing is delivering that same branded experience for your partners and understanding their brand expectations, what their customer expectations, translating that into the 3PL environment has really been kind of the key shift for me. I do think it's possible to get in the 3PL environment a little internally focused, where you're more talking about KPIs, which obviously are important, but remembering that every product that makes it to that customer is a delight that they've been expecting, and every product that might not make it for whatever reason is a true disappointment. And we really want to aspire more of those excitements than disappointments.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as someone who actually has probably the reverse experience of yourself, 20 some years in 3PL, and actually no years in retail, I think, one of the blessings and curses of the 3PL space is that you have really dedicated and committed people. And, we like to say that typically you don't find a career in 3PL, it finds you. But once it has you for a couple of years, you typically become a lifer. And, what that typically translates to is, leadership comes from within. And, for those that have been successful and demonstrated a lot of success. The curse is that can lead to tunnel vision or, a lack of experience in the outside world. And that's what I really love about you and your background, is that you flip that script and bring this amazing perspective from the lens of the client of a 3PL, or just from retailer and brand specifically. So would love your perspective on, again, from your lens, what clients are looking for today from their 3PL partner to make it be a strategic relationship. And I think, the one thing maybe the pandemic taught us is you have to view your 3PL as a strategic partner, as an extension of your business. And it can't be a procurement exercise. Yes, it needs to be a win-win for everybody. But if it's not strategic in nature, then it usually isn't going to be successful. So would just love your perspective on that.
I think the first thing that probably really derived from the pandemic is the more focus on end to end, right? So if you were using your 3PL, say in North America, to do your warehousing and your outbound logistics, you might not have been spending as much time as where are the goods being made? Where are the goods coming from? Well, when we learned that disruption can happen in every single spot in the supply chain, we had to get hyper focused as partners about what that end to end supply chain looks like, how we all get visibility to what's happening. In 2021, we're receiving goods the day before Black Friday for Black Friday, right? Because that's just the fastest they could get them. To be honest, we received goods in January that were still for holiday. So I think getting more attuned to kind of the flow of the supply chain instead of more siloed and discrete about how we think about it. And I think that's been part of the partnership. I think just honestly talking about the challenges, right? So I think when you have less of a partnership relationship with your 3PL and it's more transactional, then it's all about, did you hit or miss this KPI? Did you achieve this SLA or did you not? And while those are certainly table stakes, understanding why. So what's going on in a local labor market? How can we partner together to make sure that when people come to work, they feel like they're partnering with a 3PL, but they're also supporting that brand? So I think it's been more important to talk about kind of the good and the challenges to be able to solve them together and do that in a collaborative way. I think finally, the expectations are just getting higher, right? We're all being pressed around costs and escalation. The top line is a little bit unknown given the macroeconomic conditions. And so I think the agility to react and say, we didn't think this sale was going to do 10x of what we thought it did, but it did. And what can we do to still get those customers their orders in a timely fashion, and that agility and ability to be reactive? I think we've said that for years. I'm not sure we actually lived it until these last few years.
And specifically, Laura, the consultative side of things, right? Like, so when you come from a brand side, or as you see the pressures of the economy kind of coming down, or the volumes kind of decreasing, there is an aspect of, listen, yes, you want to reduce cost. How do we provide you consultative approach to say, here are the ways we can do it, but you need to work with us to be able to do it, right? Like that's the part that's missing. So instead of just pushing it down and saying, hey, reduce cost, I don't have any visibility, I'm just going to start pushing volume to you, don't know what that volume is going to look like. Instead, there is more collaboration to say, listen, there is best practices, because a lot of emerging brands and a lot of companies grew really rapidly through the pandemic. And it's those companies that struggle the most right now as they are seeing the downturn, because they haven't seen downturns before. They're really seasoned organizations. Yes, they have seen it. They know how to do supply chain planning. It's in situations where it's these newer brands, where I think both your background as well as, Radial's overall experience can kind of like go back and say, guys, here are some things you should be thinking about. And I think brands would be very receptive of that, because that doesn't happen in the market. Most of the relationships are just like, send me your stuff, I'll pick, pack, and ship it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think that What that means, though, is that both of us have to make investments in the relationship and make changes. So one of the downsides of all the amazing volume that we experienced during the pandemic is your ability to actually focus on being more productive and looking for ways to save money. You were a little distracted, right? If I have to try to get out enough packages when I'm growing at 30% versus looking for that, few cents that I can save per unit, we I do think have gotten distracted. So, we've gone back to some of our clients and said, we still have pack slips. That's like hundreds of printers and hundreds of cartridges of toner and paper. So in addition to not actually being environmentally sustainable, it's adding a lot of money, right, to every single package in terms of time. And so we go back very consultatively and identify those opportunities.
Exactly. And it's pack slips are A, not sustainable, right? B, who even wants those, right? Like one example is pack slips and the other one is return labels in boxes, right? Like any brands listening that are still doing that, stop doing it. Find a good partner to send an email saying, here's your pack slip. And oh, by the way, here's a link for generating return based on the policies that we have rather than a blind return label. Hopefully that stuff's being phased out, but completely agree with you, right? Like, why is that still happening? And providing, here are the options. It's not just consultative from the standpoint, you should be doing something, but here are 3 great products, including 2 from Radial that you can use for A, email generation, or B, from a return policy management type of experience. Completely agree.
But here's what we learned. The root causes of why the pack slip stays is because they're using it for store returns in many cases. And since perhaps the SKU has a different number in the store than it does in e-commerce, if the goods come back to the store doesn't have a way to identify it. So we've really had to do some, serious digging to get to the root cause, because it seems so obvious. And then you find out like, well, that's a really valid reason. What should we do to make that work then?
Yeah, no, completely makes sense. And that's a really valid use case right there, right? So, and that requires a lot of system changes for it to be digitized, let's call it. So, yeah, makes sense.
And I think, bringing up, the potential for a store return or store fulfillment, wanted to just talk about omni-channel. And I think, we still hear the word omni-channel on a daily basis. We've been hearing it for probably 10 years, and it feels like just a catch-all word for every channel. And, now we've got some exciting potential threats or newcomers in the space with the emergence of TikTok, becoming a marketplace, new players coming and going. Would love to get your thoughts on how the merchant experience demands across those different channels, influences the relationship between sellers and 3PLs, and really just how that drives, the need to look at a network and how you're going to handle retail distribution or drop shipping, Amazon, TikTok, direct to consumer. It's just, there's a lot, right? It used to be a lot simpler, but now there's just so many different channels for consumers to buy product that obviously, 3PL is already complex. That just ups the complexity even more. So again, would just kind of maybe love your thoughts on how you see that merchant experience, because it seems to be obviously different based off the sales channel, how that's influencing how brands and, 3PLs work together.
Absolutely. I think it starts with the consistency of the brand experience, right? So most of our brand partners are focused on whatever channel you're going to access their brand through. And you may access certain channels. Like right now, a lot of people are just simply using TikTok from more of a marketing perspective. Now that we're enabling commerce, will people enable commerce, or will you direct the consumer, right, to go to one of the channels that you already have to actually make that physical purchase? But it really exemplifies the lack of predictability about where consumers want to shop. I think, when you think back, it was the store, and then it was the store and maybe an online store. And then there was the advent of the social networks as part of the commerce. Now, digitally native brands are thinking about wanting to sell in different retailers, right? So doing wholesale because they want to extend the reach, doing pop-up shops at the right time to extend their brand reach. So from our perspective, we just really have to be agile to sort of be a bit agnostic about where the order is coming from and be much more focused on how we process it and get it there on time, regardless of whatever channel that it's coming through. And the customer expects it to be seamless. So they're not really interested in whether the brand's technology systems connect or not. They're not really interested if we take that order in one way or another. They're saying, I placed my order, I want my tracking number to work, and I want it to come. And so you really see not only digitally native brands, but the traditional brick and mortar retailers are also needing to keep up with this, because you really can't predict what the next channel will be where the consumer wants to shop. At the end of the day, it's about less friction and making it convenient and fast. I mean, how many of us one click buy now on any place that we can buy, right? So, I want it, I clicked, and now I expect it to show up.
Though, Laura, I do have to say that, there is the omni-channel experience from a consumer perspective, but there is also the multi-channel distribution execution part, right? Like the education around it is complex, right? Like to pick, pack, and ship a box versus having inventory and storage that has to also manage, let's call it retail distribution. And even, 80% of my volume could be e-commerce, but I have 20% that's going to a Walmart or a Target or an Ulta or a Sephora or something where I need now retail compliance. Versus I'm also doing drop shipping, right? Like, it's still a box that's being shipped out, but it's on someone else's transportation that has to have retail compliance on how you ship it out. Like that distribution complexity, I don't think there is enough appreciation of the type of gymnastics that warehouses have to do to be able to achieve some of that activity inside the warehouse, right? So I don't know if you got any opinions on, to enable that omni-channel, we also need to enable the multi-channel distribution operation.
We absolutely do. And I think a lot of that, though, is making it seamless, right? So if we waited for every customer to say, I need you to set up, retailer A or retailer B, versus it's important that we actually already go and have that enabled. And of course, the compliance may be slightly different, but then you're talking about like the 20%, not the 80% that needs to get set up. It is surprising to me always, though, that the end consumer is sort of, again, agnostic to all of that. So they're like, it might be super hard, but when I go to the store, I just want it to be where I want it to be so that I can buy it when I want it. And I think if we think about it backwards, then how do we need to simplify and take some of the complexity out of what we're designing to enable that customer expectation to be met? Yeah.
All I'm saying is it's really hard. You make it sound simple. It's just really hard to do. And I've seen it of the challenges specifically from a system standpoint to be able to manage, and also operational challenges, right? Like case storage versus each shipping. How much do I put in safety stock for retail versus how much, even though 80% of my volume is e-commerce, my contractual needs for my distribution for retail might be higher. It might take priority. So how do I allocate inventory to retail versus what I need to do for e-commerce? And again, you guys make it look simple, but it's fairly complex.
Yeah, it's very hard. You're right. I mean, we'll have inventory that's e-commerce ready that we decide we want to sell in wholesale. So then we have to transfer it. A truck's supposed to come up and pick something up, and the dock's overflowing because the truck didn't show up until 2 days later. So yeah, there's all sorts of fun stories to talk about.
Exactly. And by the way, throw in fulfillment by Amazon or any Amazon channel into the mix, and now you have orders of magnitude and complexity that you're dealing with in fulfillment operations. But that's why we love this space.
That's why we're here. Yeah. That's why we're here. Laura, I'm wondering, obviously, your past retail experience, the types of clients that Radial has. So a lot of them are, very focused on the brand experience, the customer experience at the doorstep. I'm just curious, at some point there probably has to be some give and take, right? Like we want fast, consumers want fast, they want free. Are you seeing any trends as it relates to, maybe brands giving up a little bit of that branded experience, the custom box and the tissue and the note cards, to be able to, again, if you're shipping, a Nordstrom.com dropship order or from your customers.com website or fulfilled, an Amazon seller fulfilled, or like there's there's like 4 different, potential types of packaging, right? Or SOPs related to how that product and package is built out. Are you seeing any, like something along the way probably has to give a little bit? Are you seeing that experience is more about speed and cost as opposed to, a great experience at the door, or is it something different?
Yeah, right now, so we just did a peak consumer survey, so about 1,000 people, and we saw the demand for speed to your door. So the expectation that I get it in 1 or 2 days went down about 15% from 2022. At the same time, 68% still wanted free shipping. So to me, it was more a trade-off of I still want it free, so it's okay for me to take it a little longer. I see more relaxing in that space around time in transit, maybe adding a half a day to save some money with still having a quality option, than people really wanting to reduce what they believe is key to the brand experience. Because if you think about it, if this person doesn't have access to a retail store because they don't have them, or they choose not to go to the retail store, the only impression that you make that drives brand loyalty is the opening of that box and how it's presented, and then obviously the performance or the use of that product itself. And so I think it's still going to be a really tough decision for brands to want to compromise on packaging or how the product's being delivered and presented to that end customer. And they'd rather say, I sent you a tracking number. It's okay if it comes tomorrow, right?
Yeah, exactly. And more choices, right, Laura? Like it's the, we've been talking about this on the podcast. It's like we have always looked at fast, free, but where is the sustainable choice? And I think consumers are going to lean heavily, depending on the brand, heavily on the sustainable choice. And the sustainable choice allows you to do better distribution of the shipments that go out and manage contracts as well. And then there is we haven't seen as much of the carbon footprint conversation on the consumer side, right? Like, hey, choose this. Here's your carbon footprint versus this, right? So yeah, I can arbitrage a little bit on fast shipping by charging you $25 and, it's probably going to cost me $18 on that package. But then there is that other side of it of how do I distribute my shipments and actually have a lower carbon footprint impact. And that we see that becoming more of a choice on the checkout pages going forward. So
I agree. And I actually just noticed when placing an Amazon order yesterday that I had same day, next day, and then out 2 days with a little eco leaf, right? So that's the first time I really started to see that they're branding this as the more sustainable option, even over a typical Prime experience, right? Because that Thursday would have been outside the typical Prime delivery. So I do think you'll see more of that. Again, though, the technology, as you called out, it's not so easy if your transportation management system is set up a certain way and it basically puts packages and then you say, I want to slow it down. We didn't really build the technology to say, let's have things go slower. And so we really have to think about like, how does that happen then if you're using sort of a typical rate shop?
Exactly. And I think, just to extend upon that point, and I've been saying this for a while, is there's this, we have always looked at transportation speed as something that a commerce channel makes a decision on, and then distribution systems just get the information, be like, do this because I've made this commitment. And yeah, there is some loosely defined structure around what transportation option a given client is going to see on their checkout page. But when you start integrating the actual information that the distribution systems have and start showing that from a consumer choice standpoint, where you can say, hey, I know what you want. at the point of checkout or even at the point of, the product information display page. And at that point, we are making the decision to go, listen, you got 3 choices based on your zip code. If you were to place an order right now, I can have it to you in 2 days, but I also have a sustainable choice. And like, if the systems from logistics to the commerce system are more tightly integrated, rather than make a choice, throw it over the line and say, distribution, go execute it. Instead, bringing it into play, I think we can develop a lot more good options. But to the point, these are hard choices to make. And I think, again, Radial has been known as a company that has innovated in this particular space for, decades or closer to a couple decades, not Radial, but all the past companies that were Radial. So I would say you guys sit in a really good position to do something of that nature.
Absolutely. And I think especially when a client has more than one warehouse, right? Being able to say like real time, the site in New Jersey is a little bit overwhelmed. So it's not ideal that it comes out of the California site, but it actually will get there quicker and we can manage the relative cost of that, and that's the right place to send the order. But that's a level of sophistication, right, that we need to continue to develop.
Exactly. And it's getting easier, specifically with the flexibility of the commerce channels, right? Like with the advent of the Shopifys of the world, where you can develop some of these plugins and modifications that can be deployed by 3PLs or by, clients if they want to connect their 3PLs to these commerce channels. I think it's becoming slightly more easier than it used to be back in the days when we were doing more custom commerce channel development activities.
Agreed.
Yeah. Agreed. And with, AI and machine learning, which we want to let you and Ninad geek out about, all things going on in the 4 walls powered by automation and robotics and, the emergence of AI, whatever that might mean in the future, and, machine learning as it's used today. Would love to hear how, what Radial is leaning into, what you're excited about on that front. And maybe in addition to that, how you see the balance between like human expertise and automation within the 4 walls of a logistics operation.
Yes, I think the first place that we really started was using machine learning around forecasting, right? So being able to take data and say, the client's forecast is this number, but we've seen over the past few weeks that it's been higher or lower, and then actually translate that into the labor that we need to run the business, right? And the complexity of scheduling, and there's always higher demand on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday that's come in from the weekend, and how you manage that against, say, what you're doing on Thursday and Friday when we typically see a lighter demand. So we've been using machine learning to influence our labor planning and how we manage that, the level loading to the extent that that's possible across the order flow. I think what I'm really excited about is starting to look for those generative AI use cases around employee training, employee onboarding. How can we speed the time to get those associates comfortable in their roles so that they're able to deliver the productivities? How do we serve a multitude of language needs with the complexity of robots and things like that, right? So it's not like we're just, talking about some more simplified topics. We're actually trying to translate relatively complicated things into multiple languages at one time. I think for us on the automation side, it's always going to be an enabler. I know this is a big debate about whether it replaces or it's an enabler, but particularly in the business we serve, where the client's volumes at peak can be anywhere from 2 to 25 times what they are the rest of the year. It just doesn't make an automation solution feasible for those peaks. So we really tried to develop the automation solution to enable, most notably in picking, right, which is where you spend most of your labor in terms of walking, and then using that along with our people to really create that ideal customer experience. as we were talking about before, though, some of these really bespoke, pack out requirements that are branded, it is difficult to find automation solutions that actually make sense. If you have to fold the tissue a certain way, you have to set the product on top of some tissue. You may or may not be able to use a sticker as an example. Like I haven't seen a robot that can do that yet.
That is correct. And Dan and I can actually attest to that, where when we were building an fulfillment solution, bring in more automation, we were trying to get away from branded boxes. And we were like, can we brand these boxes as it rides on the conveyor line? I can tell you, we tried a whole bunch of technology and none of it actually works, right? A certain way of, folding a tissue and dropping it in. If it's a document insertion, print and apply for a label, all of that's really good. But when it comes to the complexities of that branded experience, it's a bit difficult. I mean, there is definitely technologies around that, more like robotics that can be trained. But then they are also cost prohibitive. One of the challenges on that front is, as a 3PL, it's capital investment, right? Like you got to partner with the brand to say, listen, we're going to do this, but it's capital that's going to go in, versus robotics as a service, one of our favorite subject, right? Like to the point you were making, peak demand. It's not about replacing people. It's about bringing in automation in place that I can bring in during peak and move it out if I need to, and having that flexible automation, robotics as a service type solution. Where is Radial going with some of the robotic solutions as far as both storage, goods to person, as well as AMRs, etc. I mean, now you got flexible solutions even in the ASRS space. So.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, we're focused a lot on the picking enablement, right? So that's going to be the goods to person as well as the AMRs that are really helping to deliver that. It's also, though, about the ease of execution. So getting some of these solutions set up, particularly to do large volumes, can be quite challenging. So if you layer on the robots as a service, we actually are finding that it may be better to launch clients in a full manual solution and add robotics, to launch them 50-50 and work your way into the more robotic solution and then allow for the peak spikes. But certainly the robots as a service allows you to manage the cost side. That also links back, though, to kind of the training element, right? Because now if I'm going to be adding incremental robots at the same time I'm adding 500 people into the business, we pretty quickly have to figure out how we're going to mesh those two together. I have some videos from 2 years ago with robots spinning around, the people in their way because they didn't know what to do. And so we learned a lot from that experience, right? That you bring a lot of people in the building and a lot of robots in the building, and that needs to be highly, highly coordinated.
Yeah. And I mean, the beauty, I should say, first of all, if you go back to 3PLs themselves, right? Like the reason why 3PLs are fast at doing things that, you come from previous organizations. If, L Brands was trying to implement a new distribution center, it would probably take 1.5 years, if not more, versus a 3PL is going to bring that up in 6 months or less, right? That's because it's repeatability, having centers of excellence around, picking certain automation, picking certain ways of doing labor, and then putting them in field. And I would assume there is a robotic center of excellence that says, guys, we have the vendors validated, integrated into our system. And when the need comes, it can be a few months and we can deploy it or less, right, to enable something, versus most other organizations are going to be like, okay, robotics, let's pick what we are going to do, bring them in. And it's going to be a 1-year project before 4 robots in a pilot mode are turned on, versus you can deploy. You're going to know exactly the type of performance. So it's like start manual, bring in automation. Right.
Absolutely. But I would say 3PLs are just getting to that level of maturity. I can't tell you how many colleagues that I talk to the last few years, the challenges we've had of getting to that repeatable solution, because the integration with your warehouse management system isn't something that's easy. Teaching a whole new set of people and new skills hasn't been easy. So I do feel like we probably have worked our way up the change management curve where we're feeling that we're getting to that level of maturity.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. And I do want to touch on generative, right? So you said the use case around generative was training and change management. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Because yes, big pain point, specifically e-commerce warehouses. Sometimes you might be adding 1,000 temps during peak season in a single warehouse, right? And it's been a challenge, and it's also a revolving door. How do you see this generative AI change management future play out, Laura?
So let's start with like a basic. How many pick stations have you walked by, or pack stations where the work instructions are hanging in a plastic folder by a carabiner to the station? That's just not sustainable. They probably were last updated 2 years ago. They're not current to the current process. So being able to use a QR code and have somebody scan something that's constantly being updated, being able to have one person who is feeding in the changes to the generative AI so it can figure out and learn and then continue to keep things like that updated. I mean, that's a massive amount of paper. It's a massive amount of locations across all of our facilities. And just that alone, if you just were at your station and you had current work instructions, I think would be an amazing ability for the work staff to get really productive a lot more quickly.
I agree. I think of it this way, right? Like I imagine a future where right before starting this podcast, I got an update on my Bing browser, which is Edge browser. And so Microsoft just launched Copilot. Copilot's basically helping me with, all my meetings are saying, okay, contextually, what I'm doing right now, let me tell you contextually what information I have about it so I can prepare. It's like I'm going into a podcast with Laura. Oh, here's all the information about Laura that I have inside the company, right? Like in any PowerPoint, Word document, etc., but also bringing into consideration externally available information. So it's preparing me. It's the same thing. If you can contextually translate, right? Like, most pack stations are, you have browsers that are running it. Now, if you can contextually saying, okay, I am at a pack screen doing a split carton function because that's what I'm doing, but I'm confused. The screen knows what you are doing. It should be able to tell you, hey, here's how I can help you with this, right? Like, so I see that future coming soon. Hopefully, even the WMS systems also need to evolve to be able to adapt to that. But there is a lot that can be done by, companies like yours to help the workforce. So I'm excited about that day, specifically in the change management side of things. Now, that's pretty cool. Do you see any generative AI coming in play when it comes to assistance to supervisors or ops leaders or ops managers, right? Like rather than reading these charts and graphs on how I'm doing today, tell me what I need to do to achieve the goals I have.
Yes, I do. I think the challenge for all of us has been getting the data available and in a format that the generative AI can learn from, right? So if you think about things like if you have 20 or 30% turnover in your warehouse, who's keeping the labor roster clean so that you can actually say, I have these people or I don't. So as we've explored this, we've realized some gaps in how we keep our data up to date and how quickly that can turn, because then the generative AI has a gap in its learning, right? Because it's like, oh, I thought you had 30 more people, and you're like, I don't. Now what am I going to do, right? So there's a lot of data and integrations that we're finding that we need to build to enable that learning and be able to do that.
So it sounds like you have already, from an automation perspective, taken a really good step forward. Generative AI, right? Robotics in general, right? I got to ask, what are things you are just keeping an eye on right now? Like, let's see how it evolves, and then we'll see if a pilot is necessary. But are there things out in the industry that excite you?
Well, I do think we'll have to talk about drones, right? Like, I know we don't want to, and I know it's can be a touchy subject, but I do think at the end of the day, we're not going to have enough people to deliver all these packages. I don't know what your front porch looks like every day, but mine has a lot of packages, right? And they're coming to my house a lot. So I think that's something that we need to think about. I do think really continuing to think about like what your assortment looks like. So for the first time, I'm actually seeing the merchant and planning organizations be influenced by the supply chain, right? Before you could sort of have this, well, I need a robust product. I need to have a core product. I need to have fashion product. But if that product is causing an explosion of SKUs in the warehouse, which drives space, which is one of the most expensive things to have in a warehouse, that is really starting to influence the merchant and planning team to say, do I think about my assortment in a little more informed way, particularly that say, 10 or 20% that are very slow moving or that you sell a few of.
Oh, that's awesome. Because warehouses will need to change a little bit to support these drones, right? Like, what are we going to have? Docks that are drone supported docks, right? Automation that ties into it so that we can have more drones fly out. And I mean, that's coming, right? Like, people like it or not, that's the fact, right? Like, Amazon's been doing it for a while and they are going pretty full commercial out in UK. I think there is more regulatory challenges in North America that will be overcome without a question. FAA has already done a whole bunch of pre-work on it and designed it. So it's going to be supported nationally. 3PLs are going to have to adapt. And I look forward to that future. But do you have pilots around drones that you are taking a look at? Be like, well, what does my new dock look like now?
Yeah, we are not. We're waiting to see how the Amazon UK works out. And then also, like you mentioned, the regulatory in the United States around the zones that you can fly in. So I think similar to kind of what we did with the robotics, we'll look to see a vendor get a little more developed on their solution and then do a pilot.
And I think just another note while we talk about technologies to watch for in future, because the future is kind of here. A couple of weeks ago, I was out at an event with the Prologis team just to take a look at all the activities or things that they are doing, right? And, we talk a lot about the technology in warehouse, but tend to forget the real estate aspect of things of like, solar roofs connected to charge the electric vehicles that are actually going to do delivery. And I think 3PLs kind of sit dead center of it to say the amount of square footage that you acquire from a roof standpoint and enabling that the grid of the future to support the electricity kind of requirements, as well as powering the fleets that are starting to get electrified so rapidly. I mean, is that something that you guys are watching, something that you guys are investing in?
So we talk with all of our landlords, certainly for any new buildings and then any buildings that we can retrofit, how we think about that sustainable future. What's interesting, though, is we also really want to think about bringing more natural light into the warehouse. And that's always sometimes a challenge, right, with the solar panels. But if you think about it, I just walked a warehouse last Thursday, and there's literally just these small windows up near the ceiling, and everything else is amazing LED lights. But, when the facility is totally racked out, you're not getting the light from the dock doors. And so we're bringing these people in to work in this like very dark environment all day. So I think we're going to also have to think about the warehouse of the future. It doesn't mean just sustainability of solar panels, but like, how about our humans that need natural light, that need to, be in an environment that you want to come and work in every day?
Oh, that's beautiful. Architects, pay attention. Yeah. We need the warehouse design of the future.
I want to get your take on peak season, but before we go there, I just want to circle back to something you said earlier, Laura, and it stuck with me, and I could really appreciate the fact that you guys are actually using your data, using historical information to come up with your own forecasting and inventory planning. And one of the biggest challenges that 3PLs face, and something that's absolutely critical for success, is accurate forecasting and inventory planning. And that's usually something that's been pushed to them from their clients. And even today, historically, most 3PLs actually receive a forecast that they have to plan to, and that their SLA performance is tied to. Now, whether that forecast is, within a few points of margin of error or is 20 or 30% off, that's what labor staffing and all the planning kind of goes to that. From what you said earlier, it sounds like what you guys are doing is you're actually taking a look at that and then pushing back to the client and using your historical information and maybe some event planning or, holiday promotion. That's the word I was looking for. Promotional calendars to do your own. So is that a trend you see happening? Or is that just a proactive approach that you guys are taking on that front?
I think that it started by us being proactive, but you certainly see that it's being adopted by others in the market, because at the end of the day, depending on how your partnership is set up, right, it's about the risk reward of if you hit the forecast or if you don't hit the forecast. So what we're doing is just having informed conversations with the client to say, typically last year, this is what we saw at this time, or when you did your summer sale, this is what your forecast was. This is how you actually performed. And then having an agreement about maybe there's a range. So maybe they've given us a forecast that they believe is 100%, but in reality, they know that there's a 10% margin on either side. And then we have a conversation to agree, well, when should the labor be present? Because the flip side that we often don't think about is when we miss the forecast, we have people there that don't have any work to do. Right. Yeah. So it's not even just about missing the forecast and the financials. It's that now I have people that thought they were coming, they thought they were getting a day's work, and I've had to probably send them home for the day. The flip side, obviously, when they beat the forecast is a little easier because then we can, bring more people in or work a little bit of overtime. But I'm also trying to really turn it into the human element of, just like we talked about the customer experience, what about the people experience if we miss, day after day and I'm getting, 27 hours when I thought I would get 40.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Love it. Yeah, love it. I love that you're taking that approach, and hopefully more in the industry adopt that strategy. So, in closing, wouldn't be a podcast this time of year without asking what your thoughts are for peak season 2023. Are you feeling good about it? Do you think volume's going to be up, flat? Obviously, we're outside of the pandemic, but just want to get your overall thoughts on what this peak season will look like.
My first reaction is I'm still seeing all these articles saying peak came early, everyone's buying now, and I'm wondering where that's happening, because I don't think that Radial or our colleagues are seeing that yet. So my prediction is it's going to feel like last year. It's going to be, we'll see some demand spikes. Obviously, there was just Prime Day. We have Singles Day coming up in September. But what happened last year is it all came Black Friday and Cyber Monday, was very compressed in that window, slightly up year over year. I think that's what it's going to look like again. I think as a consumer, they're going to wait and see if the deals come. There's sort of no harm in waiting because no one's talking about a lot of stock outs or inventory issues. And so I think it's going to be who makes the first move to offer the discounts to drive that spending. So for us, again, that's that flexibility. If I have a bunch of labor that I brought into the business at the end of October and the work doesn't come until November 24th, I really have to think about what that looks like.
Makes sense. Is there excess inventory in the network though, compared to last year?
I'd say yes and no. So I think there are some people that held over inventory that was seasonal since last year that want to move through that. But in terms of new buying, I'm not seeing an enormous amount. People really, if you think about, they probably ordered February, March, right, for this fall winter season. They were already getting conservative on that ordering. So of course there's some excesses, but nothing like what we had seen last year.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Well, thank you for that, Laura. And Laura, can't thank you enough for joining us today. Really appreciate you being with us, and it's been an awesome conversation. Want to give you the opportunity to share with the audience where they can go to follow you on social media, and where they could go to learn more about the services offered at Radial.
Sure. So first, thank you both. This is fun. I think as operations people, there's nothing better than geeking out for 40 minutes about cool stuff and fulfillment. So really enjoyed that conversation. You can find Radial on LinkedIn at Radial Inc. And you can also find me at Laura Ritchey, connected to Radial on my LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ninad Acharya, CEO and co-founder of Fulfillment IQ, and I'm here with
Dan Call, CRO and partner at Fulfillment IQ. We're the team behind the eCom Logistics podcast. Our mission is to provide you with genuine insights from our work alongside logistics leaders to help you improve your supply chain.
In the eCom Logistics podcast, we share the knowledge and the insights we've gained from working alongside amazing brands, retailers, 3PLs, and VCs, so you can make the most out of your supply chain journey.
If you like what you're hearing, we'd truly appreciate your support with a 5-star rating on your favorite podcasting channel. Your feedback not only keeps us going, but also helps others find the podcast. If you think Fulfillment IQ can assist you, or if you have an idea related to logistics, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always up for a chat and ready to explore new possibilities together.
Stay tuned to the eCom Logistics podcast on your favorite podcast platform for fresh and practical insights into e-commerce and logistics. Until next time, let's keep making a difference in logistics together.